we have a way to now execute code conditionally. Now my question for you is, what if we want to give Python some alternative instructions for what to do if the condition isn't met? Because it's kind of weird right now that we say, wow, that's a lot if there's more than 100 students, but we just don't say anything kind of other than just repeating back the number of students if you have less than or equal to 100 students. So one way you could think of doing that is adding another conditional statement that says, okay, if num students is less than or equal to 100, then print out something else. But Python gives us an easier way to do that. And it's called an else statement. And so an else statement always follows the body of an if statement. So here, the body, we have this if condition, colon, and then the body, which is all indented. Then the indentation goes back to whatever previous level it was at, and we have an else, which means this else is tied to the previous if. And then the body of the else. And you can read this as being kind of like this decision tree chart thing. There's some question you ask. If the condition is true, then we execute the body of the if statement. If the condition is false, then we execute the body of the else statement. So going back to our example that we were looking at, we should say something if it's less than 100 or less than or equal to 100. Maybe we'll print that's not many. I guess 95 still seems like a lot, but let's just say less than 100 is not many, less than or equal to 100, more than 100 is a lot. And so we do exactly what we just said. So we have our if statement. Just turn on my laser pointer here. If statement, if number of students greater than 100, then we're printing more than 100, that's a lot. Else, or otherwise, we print out that's not very many. So let's take this code and go over to Replit and run it. 3 main.py. Okay, so 150 is still more than 100. Our code does the exact same thing. It says, wow, more than 100, that's a lot. But if we enter a smaller number this time, like 65, we say that's not very many. So our code is working well. We have the kind of two branches in our logic in our tree there. But sometimes you have more than just two choices. Sometimes you want to check other conditions and do other things based on those conditions. And so if you're branching in more than kind of just these two options, this is where the third statement that we're going to learn comes in, Elif. So Elif is short for else if, and we can put Elif statements after an if statement, after the body of an if statement. So we have this if space condition colon and then the body of the if, all marked by indents. And then we go back to regular indentation and immediately have an elif. And this means that we're going to check this condition only if the condition before it is false. And the reason I say condition before it is we can just keep adding as many of these elifs as we want. And what Python will do is, coming into here, it checks first, is condition 1 true? Okay, if it is, then I execute the body of condition 1, of the condition 1 conditional, and I don't check any more of the cases. So all of these other elifs, elif, else, they all get ignored. But if condition 1 is false, then we go on and check condition 2. So if condition 2 is true and condition 1 is false, then we execute the body of this second conditional, this elif. If both condition 1 and condition 2 are false, then we go and check if condition 3 is true. And if it is, then we execute the body of this condition 3 conditional. And finally, if all else fails, everything else is false, only then do we go to the else statement, kind of do the default thing. Here is alt action 3. Yeah, and I wrote this here to really highlight the fact that it's not that every condition gets checked every time. we only get to a particular condition if all previous conditions failed. And so as soon as Python finds one that's true in kind of a set of these if, elif, else conditionals that are all connected, it won't check any other ifs or else's in that set of conditionals. Let's see it in action. We have our code here. I wrote out a kind of decision tree here on the right. So if the number of students is greater than 100, we print the wow, and then that's a lot. If it's not, then we print that's not many. Okay, well, if we want to use a this elif here, we can then say, okay, if the number of students is not greater than 100, so elif, so the first condition is false. Then we're going to have an elif that says, okay, well, instead, next, let's check, is the number of students greater than 50? And if it is, we're going to print out that, oh, well, 50 to 100, that's a medium-sized class. That's pretty good. And so we have on our decision tree, if number of students is not greater than 100, then we go and check, is number of students greater than 50? And if it is, then we print that's medium-sized. And then if that's not true, then we just print that's not many. And again, I remind you here, this very last line isn't part of the conditional at all. This print, you said num students. And so it just will get executed every single time regardless. So let's take this code and over into our replit and run it. So let's say we have, again, 195 students, which is what we have in this class right now. Wow, more than 100, that's a lot. You said 195 students, that's what we expected. If we go to 75, which is in the middle, this will print 50 to 100 as a medium-sized class. You said 75. And finally, if we print something smaller, like 12, we'll just say less than 50, that's not very many. And I want to point out here, if I run this again and just enter a big number again, so, I don't know, 400, I hit enter. It says, wow, more than 100. Notice it doesn't also print 50 to 100 as a medium-sized class. Even though num students greater than 50 is true, because Python found a matching true condition earlier on in this if, elif, else conditional statement kind of block set, it executes the body of the first condition that matches, and then skips past all of the other conditions in this set. And so that's why we see only wow, more than 100, that's a lot, get printed, and not this 50 to 100 is a medium-sized class line get printed.